Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, Trump really is pushing his America First agenda with considerable vigor. So we know that he really subscribes to the doctrine of tariffs. The tariffs are the kind of solution to all economic problems, but he has already announced that he is imposing 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico and a 10% tariffs on China. That's a 10% on top of all the other tariffs that he had already imposed on China and that the Biden administration had kept in place. And interestingly enough, the media are having an absolute meltdown over this. Who'd have thought that there were so many free traders around? Everybody suddenly is passionate about free trade. How can you put any obstacles in the way of free trade?
It's so much at odds. It's diametrically at odds with American history.
Yes, exactly.
Tariff made America.
Tariffs made America. Exactly. It's throughout American history. It's had very high tariffs, which helped America become an industrial powerhouse. And the interesting thing is that when it comes to sanctions against all sorts of countries all over the world, the same media never raise any objections. We're essentially using economic coercion to try to force political compliance on the part of actually often very weak, vulnerable states. That's fine. It says that's great, including incidentally sanctions against China. That's an ongoing thing. The United States imposes all kinds of sanctions against China. Oh, supposedly they're helping the Russia in Ukraine. Whether it's the Uyghurs.
And they're dumping steel
They're
and
dumping. Exactly. That's why nobody has any problems with that. But now suddenly this is so horrific. And
it's one of these things that I find just mind-bogglingly stupid. Because Trump does it, it must be wrong.
Yes,
Well, we don't take that approach,
no,
okay?
no,
No, not at all.
no.
That is a lazy person's approach to everything.
Right.
Haven't these fools learned anything, George, since
Exactly.
2018? I mean, my problem with some of these, some, not all. I'm a tariff guy. I'm open about it. Because what you want to do is you want to target sectors of the economy that you are struggling, that are being they potentially are competitive. You want to make sure that you pick winners. You pick your own national winners. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. The problem I have is that Donald Trump, it's a little late in the game because you don't have an industrial base really to protect.
But
Okay.
yeah.
And we've had 40 years of deindustrialization. So what are you trying to protect? Okay. And then some of these companies are inefficient. Okay. And that's why people go to competitors. I mean, it's just the timing is all wrong. When you look at the heyday of American tariffs, I mean, American steel was on the rise. Okay,
Right.
outselling anybody in the world, okay?
Right.
Because you had critical mass in the United States. You had all of the resources in the United States. You had millions of people emigrating to the United States to have a workforce and all. I mean,
Right.
I'm not against. I'm for tariffs if they're really, really smart, okay? But if it's just a blanket thing, I think it's
Well,
probably
but that's in a way what the issue is. I mean, one of the reasons why American industry has taken such a nosedive is that America has pursued a free trade policy and has, as part of this empire that it's run massive trade deficits
But
with
why, George? Explain to people why. Why would the
did
United
that.
States
Yes.
accept massive trade deficits with Europe,
Mhm.
with Japan? Let's just look those two. Why would they accept it? It's
It
geopolitics.
was geopolitics. That's exactly what they did. They said, fine, we will run trade deficits with Japan in return for Japan ceasing to be any kind of a military power. It will entirely subordinate itself to our foreign policy and accept our suzerainty over military matters. But in return, you get free access to our markets. And lo and behold, Japan started wiping out American industries. Same thing with Europe. Okay, you will do this. You don't have to spend any money on your military. We'll take care of everything. So you will become subordinate to us. You will, pursue the foreign policy that we dictate to you, and you have access to our markets. And similarly with China, ever since Nixon's opening to China, that's what they did. Hey, China is very useful to us. First, it was useful against the Soviet Union, then it became just useful as a great power in Asia, following American diktats. The China things have stopped working for the Americans, and they gradually grew disillusioned with the China model, which they use exactly the Japan model for China, and it hasn't really worked. But that's the issue. So Trump goes and says, "Hey, we're running these massive trade deficits. Our industry is being wiped out. We're not a major industrial power anymore. We finance these deficits. We have huge trade deficits. Annual trade deficits are enormous. We have huge budget deficits. Whom does this help? Well, it helps Wall Street because somebody has to finance these trade deficits. I think this helps Wall Street. All this money keeps pouring into finance, into
And they
securities.
take a nice little sliver every single
That's
time,
right.
right?
And he ran on this. He promised and said, "I am going to make America great again." And in his mind, what makes America great is its industry. That's an old-fashioned view. That goes back to the 19th century or the 20th century. What's the key to political military success? Is you have a strong industrial base. That's how Trump thinks. And so he said he was going to do this, and he has indeed done this. What was interesting is that in the case of Canada and Mexico, when he announced it, he didn't bring up explicitly the issue of hey, we're going to make ourselves this sort of industrial powerhouse again. He brought up something unusual. He brought up the issue of fentanyl, this drug that was coming into the United States, and of course illegal migration. So this is the look at this. This is the fact sheet that the White House published, and says he imposes tariffs and Canada, Mexico, and China. And the first sentence: the extraordinary threat posed by illegal aliens and drugs, including deadly fentanyl, constitutes a national emergency under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Until the crisis is alleviated, President Trump is implementing a 25% additional tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico and 10% on imports from China. And then energy resource, there'll be a partial exemption for energy imports from Canada, so lower 10% tariff. And then President Trump is taking bold action to hold Mexico, Canada, and China accountable to their promises of halting illegal immigration and stopping poisonous fentanyl and other drugs flowing into our country.
Well, this is real apples and oranges here.
It is. On the other hand, as we've discussed, I mean, America is a great power. America has its own national interest, and I think when like it is appalling the number of deaths through fentanyl. The issue of this illegal immigration is a very serious one. I mean, America for decades has not addressed this problem. In fact, and it got much worse under
Well,
the Biden years.
just, close the border, get ICE to work. I mean, what does this have to do with tariffs?
Right. Though what I think is what it has to do with tariffs is that he wants to get these governments to be a lot more, particularly Mexico, to take this issue seriously, which is because Mexico's just been turning a blind eye
Yeah,
to
well, but
the migration
Mexico is
problem.
a borderline failed state
Right.
too. Okay?
Right.
I'm not sure how much more they actually can do. I'm not giving them a pass here. But I'm just not sure that this is the right toolbox to be using. I mean, you know, with the amount of resources sent into policing and law enforcement and intelligence, you tell me you can't take care of this problem. Okay, I find that really hard to believe.
But
Okay, close the border.
Right, but that doesn't really, get it because first of all, the people still crossing the border, and that even all the gotaways and so on, and then you still have all the asylum seekers. But the problem is still that if you have a neighboring country is supposed to make sure that it's not being used as a route, as a kind of migration route. And that's what Mexico has been doing for
Yeah,
years
yeah,
and years.
but
It was
George,
kind of a migration route for the entire world, not just Central America and
yeah,
Latin America. The entire world would go through Mexico and into the United States.
yeah, but I'm not sure by applying all of these tariffs, which again, I wish it would be more specific, okay, instead of just a broad brush. You could impose these tariffs, but will it stop illegal immigration and the importation of fentanyl? I mean, I don't see how the tariffs are going to do that.
Well, the idea behind it is you take it that both the Canadian and the Mexican government take these issues seriously, and they more or less admit that they haven't really been terribly helpful. I mean, that they've kind of admitted, we sort of didn't bother very much with it. Let the Americans, it's their problem. Let them deal with it.
Okay, you may be right. We'll see. We'll see
Well,
if it.
but
I
anyway,
mean,
this is just sort of a part of it. I'm obviously this was he used the issue of the fentanyl and the immigration to introduce these tariffs, but there was something more behind this, which is the and that involves the deindustrialization of America. And so anyway, here he goes on about the fentanyl. This is going through the flow of this fentanyl through illicit distribution networks has created a national emergency, public health crisis. China officials have failed to take the action necessary to stem the flow of precursor chemicals and so on. And then Mexican drug trafficking organizations have an intolerable alliance with the government of Mexico. The government of Mexico has afforded safe havens for the cartels to engage in manufacturing and transportation of dangerous narcotics. And again, and then using our leverage to ensure American safety, and so on and so on. Um, and then it goes on. But where I think it's very interesting um, is again, he says the flood of illegal aliens and drugs. Um, and then the Biden administration has fueled the worst border crisis and so on. Um, I want to just go to where this was again. He's just announcing these issues. Um, where let me just go through this. Now here we have Trudeau naturally announced, well, we will retaliate. And then, even as Canada's prime minister announced more than 100 billion in retaliatory tariffs, he made clear that he was imposing them reluctantly. And then initial tariffs were 30 billion or so on, and that would be followed by more tariffs. And then he says Canada has indicated it would tax Florida orange juice, Tennessee whiskey, and Kentucky peanut butter products from states with Republican senators.
there you go.
Mr. Trudeau said Saturday night that Canada's tariff list would include products like beer, wine, vegetables, perfume, clothing, shoes, household appliances, and so on. And then the Wall Street Journal, corporate brag that it is the dumbest trade war in history. Trump will impose 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico for no good reason. And it says there, leaving China aside, Mr. Trump's justification for this economic assault on the neighbors makes no sense. And then it says, drugs have flown into the United States for decades and will continue to do so as long as Americans keep using them. Neither country can stop it. That doesn't seem to be a very convincing argument. I mean, you basically can still say to your neighbors, hey, you got to do something about it. It doesn't matter. Yes, it's true. Americans are using drugs, but we got to stop them coming into the country. And you need to help us if you want to be a good neighbor. If you want to pursue this good neighborly policy, which is you got to do something. We've been talking about these drugs for many, many years. It's causing devastation in our countries. You have to do more to help us. I think we talk about national interest. That's a national interest. So there
Yeah,
is
but I mean,
clearly a governmental
again,
interest in preventing drugs and entering the country.
We'll see if it works. Okay. I mean, I'm a bit dubious about it, but we'll see if it works. I mean, if you really want to be robust, and I even surprised myself by thinking, let alone saying it. But I mean, if that's the issue and it's a serious issue, then you have to take control of Canada's and Mexico's border. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Forcibly.
Right.
Okay. You truly believe that is the case.
Right.
Now that's serious business, George.
Right.
Okay. Neither Canada or Mexico are going to do very much about it if
Right.
it were to happen. But if this is the precursor to all of this, then look, you can't control your border. We will.
Right.
Okay.
Right. No,
And,
I think it's
and that's a nasty business. Okay.
I think that's a fair point. But then the journal goes on, well, look, take it, again, the journal is this fanatical corporatist rag. It believes in free trade and uncontrolled
I
immigration.
believe in fair trade. Let's get away from
That's
free
right,
trade.
exactly.
Forget
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
Just delete that term.
I agree.
Okay. That
I,
is a talking point that is meaningless.
yeah, I agree.
Fair trade.
It says, take the US auto industry, which is really a North American industry because supply chains in the three countries are highly integrated. In 2024, Canada supplied almost 13% of US imports into auto parts, Mexico nearly 42%. And then industry experts say a vehicle made on the continent goes back and forth across borders a half a dozen times. And again, the question then arises, well, is that a good thing? And then it goes on, the result has been that US industrial capacity in autos has grown alongside an increase in the imported motor vehicles, engines, and parts. From 1995 to 2019, imports of autos, engines, and parts rose 169%, while US industrial capacity in autos, engines, and parts rose 71%. And you think, whoa, but if you look at these numbers, those aren't good numbers. So you're saying imports rose 169%, but industrial capacity only 71%. So in fact, the imports are not doing, America a great deal of good. These are parts, whether in a whole cars as a whole or spare parts or whatever, they're being produced elsewhere, not in the United States.
Well, George, I see more and more and more Chinese cars every
Right.
single day.
No,
And I wonder, oh, some of them look pretty cool. How many does China outsource parts for its cars? I would tend to doubt it.
I tend to doubt it too.
I tend to doubt it.
I tend
Okay.
to doubt it too.
I mean, this is, we go all about, Clinton, this is this whole
Right.
neoliberal model.
Right. Right.
Okay. It's made a very small number of people fabulously wealthy. I mean,
right.
The robber barons, the Gilded
Right.
Age, has nothing on what's going on now. Okay.
Right.
But that was a choice. That was a political choice, a bipartisan choice.
Yep.
Now, I think, do you want American cars made by Americans with American parts? They're going to be probably more expensive initially, but we need to build the scale, and we're going to make cars that Americans can drive and the world will want to buy. But
Right.
that plan was sold out 40 years ago.
Well, that's why. But that Trump did say. I mean, that's why it's make America great again. We don't know whether it's going to work.
George, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm saying if you want to go down this path, it's going to be painful. It's going to be very painful.
It will be painful, but nonetheless, I mean, this is how countries, develop economically, which is they decide that certain industries, it's vital to have a powerful national industry, like the auto industry. Like, you basically, Germany made a decision that he wanted to have its own national auto industry. In other words, whether it's Volkswagen or BMW, Mercedes-Benz, that's our auto industry, and we're going to make sure that we keep it here in Germany as part of our national identity. The French did the same thing, with the Peugeot, Citroën, that's part of their national identity. So you can't just simply say, "Oh, well, it doesn't really matter. We'll just
let it does matter.
Exactly, of course it is. We'll just let anyone import their cars, and suddenly we don't have an auto industry anymore.
But what about the shareholders, George? See, this free trade nonsense.
That's right, exactly.
But the shareholders, okay,
Right.
They
Yeah.
don't have an interest in the national interest, okay? And that's why this is going to be such an up. I read this a few years ago. I should have filed it, but amazing expose on the defense industry. How much parts are outsourced, even to China.
Yeah, exactly. That's
I mean, this, so,
exactly.
we only heard about, supply chains. That was a term that was invented for COVID. No, it's been around a very long time. It was
Right.
just exposed.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly. And so here we have this is an article in the New York Times, which is kind of interesting. It says Trump's Canada and Mexico tariffs could hurt car makers. And it says General Motors and a few other companies make as much as 40% of their North American cars and trucks in Canada and Mexico, leaving them vulnerable to tariffs. So really? So General Motors, which is, again, this was America's premier auto manufacturer for years. The famous saying, what's good for General Motors is good for America. He says it makes as much as 40% of their North American cars and trucks in Canada and Mexico. That's so.
Yeah. And remember, everybody, during the financial crisis, I renamed General Motors to Government Motors. So
Right.
the government bails out this
Yeah.
company.
Yeah.
It
That's
bailed it out for its shareholders, not for the American
that's
consumer.
right. Exactly, for its shareholders. And then here it says almost all automakers are going to feel a pinch from the new tariffs. And then auto manufacturers ship tens of billions of dollars worth of finished automobiles, engines, transmissions, and other components each week across the borders, U.S. borders with Canada and Mexico. Billions of dollars more are imported from parts manufacturers in China. So all of that is, well, so Trump is kind of raising an important issue here, and then he goes on that the tariffs that take effect 12 a.m. on Tuesday, and so they're expected to raise prices, and then General Motors will be probably be the most effective. GM produces many more vehicles in Mexico than any other manufacturer, over 842,000 in 2024. And then goes on, and all of the Chevrolet, Equinox, and Blazer sports utility vehicles GM sells in the United States come from Mexico. So all of them, all of the Chevrolet, Equinox, Blazer sports utility vehicles, and so the Chevrolet Silverado pickup truck, a top-selling model, and the similar GMC Sierra pickup generate huge profits for the company. And then of the more than 1 million of these trucks built last year, nearly half were produced in Canadian and Mexican plants. Nearly half. All told, GM plants in Canada and Mexico produced nearly 40% of all vehicles the company made last year in North America, the region where it gets most of its revenue and almost all of its profits. And you can see why the automakers, the workers in the auto industry, traditionally Democrats, voted for Trump. They said, hey, we're just being wiped out here. We're just losing our jobs all the time. That's why they were so responsive to Trump's message. I mean, that's something very unusual for essentially, above all, auto workers going for a Republican. And then several other automakers, including Stellantis, Toyota, and Honda, also make about 40% of their North American cars and trucks in Canada and Mexico, but they produce fewer vehicles than GM. And then goes on. Stellantis, which owns Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram, produces all of its Chrysler Pacifica minivans at a plant in Windsor, Ontario. It also makes the Dodge Charger muscle car, including a new electric version there. About two-thirds of its highly profitable Ram pickups are made in the United States, but the other third comes from Mexico. And then Toyota and Honda rely more heavily on Canada than any other manufacturers. Both make more than 1 million vehicles a year in North America, and plants north of the border account for over a quarter of that. Toyota makes some of these RAVs, these SUVs in the United States, but most come from plants in Canada. The company also makes Lexus SUVs in Ontario. Honda is in a similar position with its Civic sedan. Most are made in Ontario. So this is, when you suddenly start talking about this, you say, whoa, clearly all these fantastic these trade agreements. First there was NAFTA, then there was USMCA, and they say, yeah, this is great. Basically the US has indeed outsourced its manufacturing to other countries, and then that's why
Not just the auto industry.
that's just the auto industry, exactly. And then we can talk about everything else, like computers,
Pharmaceutical,
aerospace, and everything.
pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals, exactly. Suddenly you're making it elsewhere. And this is supposed to be America. This is supposed to be this huge economic power, and yeah, that's why it's becoming a financialized economy, because you're essentially you're not producing anything, and therefore the only way you can go on making money is through financing these trade deficits, and all this money goes to Wall Street, and they're sitting pretty, and they're the ones screaming, "Oh no, free trade, free trade, free trade!" Well, of course you're doing very well out of free trade.
George, nothing less than a Marshall Plan for American industry is needed. Nothing less than that.
I
Okay,
agree.
I can't see how this can be reversed quickly and easily and cheaply. I just don't. I mean, look, traditionally speaking, at least, and I think we're still in this era, to be a great power, you make things people want.
That's right. It has to be. Yeah.
And there are very few exceptions. Okay,
Right.
very few exceptions. Like Switzerland. Okay, but they're not a great power.
They're not a
Okay,
great power. That's right. But even Switzerland, they do produce things that people want. I mean, they spit those watches. I mean, they're renowned for their watches, their chocolates. Again, there's a lot of money to be made in watches and chocolates, but they're not a great power. Of course, they
power.
also make a lot of money on tourism. A lot of people go there for their skiing vacations. But you're absolutely right. The source of your power is if you produce. If you've got a manufacturing industry, you're going to be a great power, because if you have a manufacturing industry, you can make yourself into a military power, and that in the end it counts. You're just
You're,
making a lot of money
you're
doing things.
describing China. You're describing to some degree India.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And so when you're doing other things, whether public relations or advertising or marketing, all these fancy things that supposedly raises a lot of money here and there, it's nothing. It's basically
And everybody, let's be honest. George already talked about the German automotive sector. Does the government help? Yeah, it does a lot.
yes,
Look at South Korea. Does the government help the auto industry there?
right,
Oh, yeah, quite a bit.
right,
Japan? Oh, yeah, quite a bit.
right,
Okay. China?
yes,
Absolutely. Okay. Because these are national champions.
yeah,
Okay. A word you never hear in American parlance
right.
anymore.
That's
Okay.
right. That's
Okay.
that. Yeah,
And so in 2008, the American taxpayer rescued General Motors, government motors, as I called it then,
right,
uh, for it to outsource all of its production
right,
abroad.
right,
Wow, what a good deal for the American
right.
people.
Exactly. Exactly. They got all this money from the government, from the taxpayers, and then they use that money in order to, for the for the shareholders to buy back stock, but for the company to outsource their manufacturing, which means work for foreigners, but no work for Americans. That's not a good deal. I mean, the reason you get money from government, and in fact, this was even explained to, I think it was the guy, Steve Jobs. I think Steve Jobs was still alive then in the days of Obama. Said, well, yeah, we can help you, but we kind of expect you to build your plants here in the United States and providing employment for Americans. So, well, and then Steve Jobs said, no, I can't, it's all very, very complicated and so on. So, but you're getting all this assistance from America. I mean, it wasn't handout, but a lot of assistance that they get, promoting their product from the U.S. government. But in return, they go and build their plants in China.
Look at the aerospace. Look at Boeing.
Right,
I mean, Boeing's turned into an international joke. I
right,
mean, it's a dangerous joke too, as well. So, I mean, I understand where Trump is coming from, and as we said at the top of the podcast, America made itself great and powerful and very
right,
rich all because of tariffs.
Yeah.
Okay. So tariffs are not a dirty word. It's
No.
only been recently. I mean, none of these people have cracked a history book or an
Right.
economics book. Okay.
Right. Right.
But tariffs have to be very strategic. They have to be very, very smart. And you have to have um, a general goal of what you want to achieve from a tariff. That's what they did in the 19th and early 20th centuries. They looked at very specific shipbuilding. We need to,
Right.
we're getting the British are smashing us here. Okay, let's go. Very targeted, and it helped. It actually ended up they were picking winners when it comes to even companies.
Right.
Once you get a certain scale, that's what happens.
Right.
Okay, that was really smart. And
Well, I think
and
that I
and
agree.
if you look at American politics for well over a century, George, yeah, sure, should there be an income tax? Of course, slavery has to be ended, and immigration. Every single election was about tariffs,
Right.
one way or another.
Right. Right. No, I think that's right, and I think that it's also interesting. We have all these journalists talking about this, how this is going to be inflationary and is going to raise prices. Well, they don't know that. I mean, the tariffs in and of themselves aren't inflationary. I mean, inflation has a specific cause, which is if you print money, you basically just print money in order to generate economic growth. And what happens then is, of course, the value of money goes down. I mean, so it's usually pretty simple. The fact that certain prices go up as a result of tariffs, even assuming that the importers pass on the increased
Pass it
costs
on.
onto consumers, we don't know that they will necessarily do that, because after all, they do want to remain competitive. I mean, after all, they know if you raise the prices of your products, then you're not going to be as competitive. So even if they do that, there's certainly certain products that would be more expensive. It's not necessarily inflationary. So people don't really
And
even
what
know
it
what
could be,
inflation is.
George brings up a really good point because it could be a tax on a tax on the companies that are importing their own
Right.
goods. Okay,
Right.
because sure you can pass. Oh, we just pass it on to the consumer. Well, that'll put you out of the market. No
That's
one's going
right.
to buy your cars.
That's
Okay,
right.
so in a way, Trump is saying now you have to pay the piper for what
Right.
you've done.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
your bottom line, you're going to have to suck on it for a
Right.
while. Okay.
Right.
Georgia, God, it's such a good point. They're not necessarily inflationary, but that's the only thing you read in the
That's right.
main.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Because I think people don't even understand what inflation is. What is the cause of inflation? But so that's the thing. You don't know whether they're actually going to pass it on to the consumer. But if they do, then it means that they're essentially helping to price themselves out of the market. So there's no. I mean, if let's say you're a champagne importer, so they pass it on to the price. Well, okay, that means domestic what America they call it champagne. Domestic champagne produces America. Great. It's nice for us because the French champagne is so much more expensive. So it doesn't raise. They're not going to raise their prices. American domestic producers aren't going to raise their prices. Why should they? It doesn't make any sense for them. So it's not inflationary. But again, if you just go, what is Trump trying to do here? And what I think Trump is trying to do, he's trying to make America great again. He's saying, well, we got to go back and try to achieve this. That's what he promised to do. I mean, we don't know whether it's going to be successful or not. But he did say this is what he would do, and he said this over and over again. And you're supposed what's been in a way refreshing about Trump. I mean, we just did a video we had a very negative view of Trump, particularly when he came to Gaza. But on other things, he's trying to pursue the agenda that he ran on, which is what you're
And,
supposed to do in
and
politics.
this is in this regard on this topic, this is a very refreshing departure from a failing past.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
as we said at the top, this was a geopolitical decision, but that was to make sure that the U.S. Goods had a market in Europe. I mean, if you have no money,
Yeah.
then you can't buy anything, right?
Right.
So prop up their industries, let have them easy access to the American market, and they can rebuild. They rebuilt. Okay, the European Union has more people than the United States. It's
Right.
economically speaking, it is larger. Okay,
Right.
Japan ain't a poor place. Okay, South Korea. one of the most
Right.
successful nation states in modern history. I mean, they almost defy logic considering their population and their geographical size.
Right.
They kick ass in the world, okay? Because they're smart.
Right.
They make Korea always great is their point of view.
Right.
That's how they look at the world.
Right.
The whole world outside of Korea is the enemy. That's how they see it.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That's, yeah,
Okay.
no, exactly.
But Trump is doing is finally breaking the shackles of that.
Right.
We're not in rebuilding from the Second World War anymore. We're not fighting the Cold, at least the old one anyway, the old Cold War. We're not doing that anymore. We haven't
Right.
been doing it for a very long time.
Right.
And this has been at the expense of the slowly but surely eroding,
Right.
okay? Because of course, with the original arrangement, people were buying American goods. That was good,
Right.
okay? But
Right.
it shifted. It shifted
Right.
and the social impact has been I mean it's hard to comprehend the how many deaths of despair are there in America
Yeah.
now,
That,
okay,
that,
because of
yeah.
poverty,
Yeah.
because of unemployment, low wages, lack of dignity,
Right.
deaths of despair are outrageous in a rich
Yes.
country.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, you got in the United States, you have a declining life expectancy, and it's a declining life expectancy among the middle class. In other words, the very people who should be employed. Yeah, I mean the wealthy, those who are doing well, that yeah, their life expectancy continues to rise, but among the great majority, the life expectancy keeps going down. That's a real problem. So
And George, on top of that, with lower life expectancy, there are fewer families. It's,
right.
when I was great, don't usually talk much about myself, but my mother gave birth to 8 children, 8, and she didn't work. My father
Right.
took care of a huge family of children. It's impossible today. Rich people can do it.
Rich people can do it. Yeah, yeah.
And that's what their whole purpose is, to maintain and bequeath their wealth. Poor people, they're on the dole. And then you have, who's paying for those that don't need to pay taxes because they have political power. And then you have the middle class that pays for the underclass. And then the middle class gets smaller and smaller. You know what that creates? Feudalism.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I think that when we look at what Trump is trying to achieve here, he is trying to essentially have a strong middle class, a middle class that is primarily employed doing real things, which is producing things, making stuff people want to buy, not kind of phony stuff like public relations, which nobody really even knows
Or
what it is.
telemarketing.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, telemarketing, and so on. And so, this is, the source of economic and political power. And this is really kind of interesting because if the United States goes down this path, then the ultimate, logical consequence has to be the dissolution of the transatlantic alliance. And this has to be a good thing, a wholly good thing. I mean, this is the most wonderful thing possible that could come out of this is the Europeans will finally, eventually be, kicked. It's like the teenager finally kicked out of his home and they say, hey, we kind of have to make a living in this world.
And what will that teenager have to do? It's going to have to make peace with its neighbor in the
Right.
East.
Exactly. Exactly. Because it has this huge advantage. It has this huge, because this massive source of energy, raw materials, agricultural, whatever produce, precious metals, all of that, which Russia has, and which could be absolutely at Europe's disposal. Russia's offered it, and it's turned its back on that. It can make use of it. And then this could, be the beginning of the end of this monstrosity called NATO and the monstrosity called the Transatlantic Alliance. So, this is, I mean, Trump has openly said, I really don't care much about NATO. I mean, he's inherited NATO and he kind of, goes along with it. But fundamentally, he's saying, I'm only interested in American workers and American industry. And that's kind of what an American president is supposed to care about. And that's what Europeans should start caring about, about their own workers.
Prosperity at home is one of the ingredients of security abroad. Okay. That's so very important. Um, um, being in this, the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world, is in a military alliance with Montenegro. Can
That's right.
somebody
Yeah,
explain to me why?
right. Exactly.
Why?
Exactly. Why? Why? And that's the thing. And Trump kind of raised a question. He says this isn't a military alliance because Montenegro doesn't do anything for us. This is a protectorate. We're running these protectorates.
It's a racket. It's a
it's
racket.
it's it's a protection racket that's actually running, and they're all basically doing very well. They're making out like bandits. And what are we getting out of this? I mean, he had to raise the issue, and now he's actually pursuing economic policies entirely because he's already promised that next up EU. We've got the tariff, the first tranche of tariffs. That's Canada, Mexico, China. Next up, the EU. I mean, he said this the other day. So the EU had better sort of brace itself for the Trump round of tariffs. Yeah. Then you start thinking about stop worrying about Trump and start thinking about what
Yeah,
you need to do.
because Trump, with all of his failings, and there are many, he cares more about the prosperity of the American people. He doesn't care about French farmers. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to surprise everybody.
Right.
Okay. But that's just how he feels. And with that kind of attitude, the European project, I think it's doomed to failure in its current iteration. It's got to do a major rethink, a big time
Right.
rethink,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Because the United States is no longer in the position to
Right.
continue what it did in the post World War II era. That is
Right.
over. It doesn't pay dividends.
No.
It's destroying
Right.
America, is what it's
That's
doing.
right. That's right. It's right. Exactly. You
And,
could.
and one last thing, George. I don't like to be apocalyptic here. Trump was the last one that's going to try this.
Yes. Yep.
Nobody's going to try this.
Yep.
I mean, you can say it's outrageous, it's crazy, it's dumb. You can say all those things, and we can have a conversation about it. But this is the last time
Yeah.
it could happen. Because do you think Marco Rubio is going to do something like this? Marco, okay?
Right.
And all these other little clowns in the chorus. You think they got the balls to think this way? Again, it could be all, ill-founded. I'm not going to, the jury is out, okay? But there's nobody that in our lifetime would thought so boldly.
Right.
Okay.
No, I agree. I agree, and that's why I think this election was of such enormous significance. And that this is going to be, either America is going to really just cut the Gordian knot and try to resolve problems that have been accumulating for decades, long before, in fact, the end of the Cold War, or it's just going to continue as before, just the same kind of drift. And yeah, Trump has sort of blazed the trail on all sorts of issues that have been raised before. People have been talking about America's trade deficits and budget deficits.
And Buchanan, remember?
Yeah, exactly. And they say, exactly the Japan. I mean, in the 1970s, people were, wringing their hands, but no one did anything. You say, look what the Japanese are doing. They're targeting our industries and they're just simply wiping them out.
I remember there was like not Red Dawn, that was a different film, but I remember there was this big blockbuster about how Japan is taking over America.
Yeah.
And nobody did anything about it.
No one did. That's right. Yeah, it wasn't Red Dawn. I know which film you're talking about. Yeah,
it's like Red Sun, Rising Sun.
Yeah, Rising Sun. Yeah. But that was 70s and 80s. That was the thing. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, they were there because, of course, giving them access to the American market. The Japanese could just pick off one industry after another. The auto industry, then they picked off the shipbuilding industry,
televisions,
computers, exactly, television, computers, all kinds of consumer goods. Boom, boom, boom. Everything was now made in Japan, and you went into any electronics store, and where are the American products? No, everything is made by the Japanese.
Does Texas Instruments even exist anymore? I don't think so.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
But I can remember when I was growing up about Japanese cars. I remember an expose is that the Japanese, their factories were on ships.
Yeah.
And so if you're in California and you want a certain model with these tires and these hubcaps and color and all of that, they would telex the ship and they would make it en route.
Right.
and they would have it finished when it got to the port and you could
Yeah.
pick up the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Exactly. Exactly. And that model, the meaty model, which was, the Japanese had, that's, it's a partnership between government and industry. The government provided the guidance, the targeting, the subsidies, and so on. And the South Koreans took it over. I mean, South Koreans had their own version of meaty. But America just sort of, just left, okay, well, we still got a big military. But ultimately, that's going to affect it. If you don't have an industrial base, then that's going to affect your military power. And so that you eventually you had to address it. You had to address the fact that you're getting your population is not employed, making things. Other countries are making things, and Americans are not making them. So somebody had to come along and try to address that problem. I mean, somebody had been threatening. There were various figures. Ross Perot threatened to do it. There was Dick Gephardt in the 1980s threatened to do it, but nobody actually got it done. They got Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton just happily signed off American industries with NAFTA. So this is it. I think you're absolutely right. This I think is the last chance to address this issue.
And again, George and I have gone back and forth on all of this. Again, I'm much more, a laser. I'd like to see more laser focused on things that would and have a plan of what you want the result to be. Having said that, it's going to be stormy waters for a while. This is going to be, and it's going to be a lot of accusations. And
Right.
George and I have already played our high card here. Is that it's going to be the manufacturer is going to pass it on to the consumer? Are they going to start getting smart? Okay. It'll be up to them. Okay. Because the consumer will drop you like a hot potato. Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because hey, you're shooting yourself in the foot. If you pass it on to the consumer, that's it. They're gonna go for the cheaper American product, which is of course what Trump is trying to achieve here. So yeah, that's it. We're trying to price you out of the U.S. market that you've been enjoying so nicely for all these years. So that the whole thing, this hysteria that, oh, this is going to be inflation is going to soar. No, that's not the source of inflation. That's not how you get inflation. Inflation is what Trump did at the end during COVID, and then Biden did. You start printing money in order to stimulate economic growth. That's how you get inflation.
And this is a huge test. I mean, Donald Trump is putting the American economy on a petri dish right now.
Right.
Okay. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Well, it's all I can say. It's about time.
Yeah.
I don't know what the result is going to be. I don't. Okay. But something has to give. And George again brought up the most salient point. If it works, then this whole transatlantic nonsense goes away quickly.
Exactly. It'll be the quickest, the most efficient and effective way of ridding ourselves of this monstrosity called NATO. We've been talking about this for a long time. How do we get rid of it? Because by dint of momentum, it just goes on and on and on, and we don't know how to do it. But this essentially, and a good dose of economic competition, that's going to bring it to an end. Europeans are going to start thinking, hey, we have to worry about our own economies because,
they're not doing too well, George.
No. And they might think, hey, we've got other things, more important things to worry about than Ukraine. Ukraine suddenly becomes a very minor issue when it becomes a matter of your own national survival.
One of the other things I wanted to mention earlier is that this rules-based order, I think I'm the only person that has said it in this year so far. Okay. And that's good. And that's a good thing, everyone.
Right.
But Trump has thrown down the gauntlet, and this is what's going to shake up a lot of elites right now. Is it, well, why did you beat up on Colombia? They're our closest friend in the hemisphere. Trump doesn't care.
No.
Friend? Well, what's that? I mean, this is a liberal piety.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
what?
Right.
We don't have friends.
That's right.
We have competitors.
That's right.
That's what this world is all about.
Yeah.
It's sorry, Burrell, but the whole world is a jungle, okay, when it comes to power.
Right.
So, oh, you're doing this to our, don't do it to the Canadians.
Right.
No, the nation state, when a nation state is in crisis, it doesn't call 911.
Right.
There's no 911. No
No.
one's going to come and rescue you.
Yeah.
Okay. Colombia, Paraguay, Belize,
Right.
do the best you can. Okay. Maybe we
And,
can work together, but why
no,
should why should I, sweat for you?
that's right. That's absolutely right. And in fact, the case of the Colombia was very interesting. I mean, Colombia said, we're not going to take back these criminals that you're deporting to us. And Trump said, okay, fine, then we're just going to hit you with tariffs. So the Colombians, oh, we're going to hit you with tariffs. Then they thought, hey, you got to calm down. I mean, this is you're taking the United States. I think we're not going to get into an economic war with the United States. I think we know what the outcome of that, and they quickly changed their position. All right, we will take them back.
Do you think I like this kind of cowboy behavior? No, I don't. Okay, because I think it's really unnecessary. But this trial balloon, we can try and say that with Colombia, it sends a message to everybody else in the flock. Okay, this is the way the United States is going to start dealing with its trade policies.
Right. But I think that's right.
You need any more examples? Okay, because they'll be provided for you, or get with the program. And ultimately, it will help these other countries as well.
Well, I think so, and you can't just simply say particularly Colombia. I mean, Colombia was onto a hiding to nothing. I mean, you can't just simply say we're not going to take back our nationals. I mean, it was an absurd. It's an absurd position to take. Of course, the Americans are going to start leaning on you to assume that the United States says, well, if you're not going to take them back, then you're not going to take them back. I mean, what can we do? I mean, maybe somebody before that might have taken that position, but Trump isn't going to take that view, just saying, oh, well, particularly as he has said this over and over again, that whenever, Mexico or El Salvador or Guatemala says to us, we can't do something or other, Mr. Trump, he said, oh, as soon as they said that, I immediately threatened them with tariffs. So Colombia, I mean, for Colombia to get into this fight was just stupidity. I mean, they had to have known that's exactly what Trump was going to do. And again, we're going back to Mexico and Canada. Trump has given adequate warning that this is what he was going to do. And, to be honest, I have so little sympathy for Canada. I mean, I think Canada, particularly on Ukraine and on NATO and everything else, Canada has been among the most disgusting countries.
Neighbor.
Exactly, your neighbor, and then we go back to that event when they had that Nazi being celebrated in the parliament in Ottawa. I mean, they've been doing this for years. They've been giving refuge to Nazis for years.
Passive
The worst. Yeah, exactly. So, any attempt by Justin Trudeau now on our sympathy, pulling on our heartstrings, which the media are now playing up, they don't deserve anything. I mean, they're getting what was long been coming to them.
Turn the page or
Right.
close the book, everybody.
Right.
Like if it's not going to happen now, look, the nation state is on trial,
Right.
and Trump is the lawyer for the defense, because there's nobody, virtually no one. Okay, Audubon. Okay, but it's a small country.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so people say they like to bandy about the word nationalism. I keep telling people sovereignty. Sovereignty. Okay.
Right.
If you don't control your economic sovereignty, particularly for a great power, then you won't be a great power.
Right.
And in the case of the United States, considering it's run by so many sociopaths, they're just going to use the military. No, I would rather use these tools. Okay.
Right.
Tariffs, taxes, and sanctions. I'm not very happy about. Okay. Hardly
Right.
ever.
No, I think so. And again, with the United States, he says, hey, we have the strongest industry should have the strongest industries in the world. We should have the strongest agricultures in the world. Why are we running trade deficits? He says, we should be running trade surpluses, given our economic strength, given how productive our economy is. I mean, Americans work hard enough. I mean, they work harder than any other people in the world. We work hard enough, and yet we're running trade deficits. This doesn't make sense. Something is clearly going wrong here. And particularly, when you have a trade deficit, you're exporting jobs. I mean, that's it. You just always think about that. Trade deficit means you are exporting jobs. Jobs are going somewhere else, and then you're not employing Americans. So, it makes absolute sense. Say we've got to, deal with this problem. It's a long-standing problem, and it should have begun to be dealt with back in the 1970s when the trade deficits first started appearing.
Yeah, and George and I like to dump on Europe a lot. Okay, that's what we want to do. But why don't the French do this? Why don't the Germans do this? Why don't why doesn't Britain do this? Okay. I mean, Nigel Farage has been saying some things like this. Okay. It's time to bite the bullet. Enough of this kicking the can down the road. Okay. It just makes the world supremely unsafe. Okay. It really does. And, this is a kind of a very sliver of libertarianism that's in me. Okay. Because I think these things are better tools.
Right. That's right.
All righty, we'll see what Trump does. Okay, I mean, he's bold.
It's been an interesting 2 weeks. I mean, that's we can say those.
Yeah, and this evening we've done two podcasts. George and I were very, very skeptical, even very negative in one area. In another area, was a ray
much more positive. So, exactly. Yeah.
Very much a mixed bag. Okay,
yeah, exactly.
Buckle up. Okay, prepare for impact, everybody. That's what it's going to be like. All right, everyone, that's our wrap here for Sunday. Tomorrow we do our live stream at 10 a.m. Eastern time. And then on Tuesday,
it's at 3 p.m. Eastern time. It is time for my solo live stream. So please join us tomorrow at 10 a.m., 7 a.m. on the Pacific Coast, real crack of dawn there. And, if you have questions, comments, criticisms, everything is welcome. Please, think as homework assignment, try and think of as many good, tough, challenging questions between now and 10 a.m. tomorrow. And now we got the difficult issue, which is these ferocious animals who are really, they're chomping at the bit. Literally, they're just gnawing at everything that comes their way because there's just not enough in the tip jar. And they're getting into the sort of tearing furniture apart, tearing one another apart. So if you have some money, to spare, something in your pocket, something stuck under the bed, please get it out. Please put it in the tip jar. Maybe that'll put them into a less combative mood. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and we might have more polite, better mannered, friendlier dogs sometime in the future. Who knows? Anything may happen. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.